like to call this the June 16, 2005 JEA Board meeting to order. We could all stand for a moment of reflection. Thank you. Ms. Wiggly?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
This time I'd ask for a motion so that we may adopt the agenda for this meeting.
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And now moving to the safety briefing, I call upon Timothy Carter to provide that for us. Welcome.
Good afternoon. In the event of an emergency, Mike Brost has agreed to call 911. Vicky Cavey has agreed to call security. Is there anyone in the room CPR certified? Would y'all assist if needed? Thank you. If the need arises to evacuate the building, we'll use the stairs to the left of the elevators. When exiting, be cautious of surroundings, any trip hazards. Use the handrails when descending the stairs. There are fire extinguishers located outside in the hall, but we'll only use those to clear a path if need be. Once out of the building, we'll meet on the corner of Main and Ashley at the church parking lot. There are restrooms located down the hall to the right. If you would, please silence your cell phones, turn them off. Thank you. A little bit about myself. I've been employed with JEA for 6 years as a power plant operator at Northside Generating Station. I directly report to Steve Lankford. My senior manager is Jim Stanson. We're under Director Randy Stroop and Vice President Mike Brost. My primary responsibilities at Northside are safe and reliable operation of the auxiliary equipment associated with the CFBs and the turbine generators. In 2004, I was a PASS award winner. Before coming to JEA, I had 20 years of experience in the pulp and paper industry with Gilman Paper Company, Durango, Georgia. That's in St. Mary's, was in St. Mary's, Rainier Performance Fibers in Fernandina Beach. I also have 4 years of nuclear power generation with Southern Company at Plant Hatch in Baxter, Georgia. Been married to my wife, Debbie, for 28 years. We have a son, Brandon, a daughter and a son-in-law, Brittany and John. My spare time, I like to freshwater fish. Got a Harley I like to ride, and I like tinkering with antique automobiles. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Thank you.
Are there any comments from the public? Okay. I see that our council liaison is present with us, Councilmember Ms. Bishop. This will be your last JEA meeting with us. We certainly thank you for all your service to the board, JEA, on the city council and the community at large. Your contributions will be missed.
It's been a lot of fun. I've enjoyed it. I've learned a heck of a lot. Learned a lot more about JEA than I ever thought I ever would know. And it's very important, and as we've talked before, it's very important that the new council members also get a good understanding of what JEA is and why it's important to allow it to run like a business. And I know, Paul, you and I talked about that a lot, and I believe that that's very important for the long-term benefit of JEA and the city as a whole. And I wish everybody the best. It's been an honor and a privilege to be here, and as we all move on to our next ventures.
Well, it's been an honor and privilege for us as well.
You can always come back.
Right.
Every third Tuesday, if I have nothing better to do.
You're still getting a bill from us, by the
I
way.
know, but you'll have to fill out a yellow card. Sorry.
But I've learned a lot about energy conservation.
Well, there you go. That's right. Thank you. Okay, we'll move on to the consent agenda for today's meeting. There are 3 action items on the consent agenda: that approval of the board minutes from May, approval of the board planning retreat minutes and appointment of Helen Kurt to the Civil Service Board. Can I have a motion for approval of the consent agenda?
So move.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
And if Helen, you can stand. Well, congratulations on your appointment to the Civil Service Board, and thank you for your service. Thank you. Okay, moving on to the strategic portion of the program. Jody Brooks from the Office of General Counsel will give us a presentation on our disclosure policy.
Good afternoon, Jody Brooks, Office of General Counsel. Not really much of a presentation, it's just at the last board meeting, the board had approved the JEA disclosure procedures policy, and a question got raised about whether or not the conflicts of interest of the board members should be a part of that policy. We reached out to our SAC experts on the matter, and they have submitted an actual memo that's in your packet under tab B1. And they have advised against revising the policy to add that it's not necessary because it's captured in other policies in the charter and statutory provisions about disclosures of conflicts of interest. But if you have any questions or thoughts about the memo or you want to discuss it any further, now's the time.
Madam Chair?
Sure.
I know I brought that up at the last meeting, so I don't have any issues. The memo was helpful, and I appreciate you closing that out.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Thank you, Jody. As Jody mentioned, okay, now we'll move to the recommendation to call a public hearing to modify the electric tariff documentation and the water and sewer rate document. Melissa Dykes, please.
Thank you. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
We are continuing to work through the rate restructuring that we've been discussing with the board for a number of months. And we'll present something for the board's consideration in the coming months on that subject. In the meantime, however, there are a number of topics that we recommend the board consider calling a rate hearing for in July. And the purpose of this presentation is to give a rundown of those topics. The first is streetlights. We, in partnership with the city, have been exploring offering LED streetlight tariffs to be made available to our community. In connection with offering those new streetlight rates, however, we did go back and re-perform a comprehensive cost of service study for our streetlight tariffs, which has not been performed in a number of years. We also performed an audit to do an updated count of the number of streetlights that are in our service territory. And so we're recommending next month that the board consider calling a hearing to address the new streetlight tariffs and roll out streetlight tariffs that update this cost of service and appropriately reflect the cost of providing service for both the traditional HPS streetlights and the new LED streetlights, which we'd then be able to begin phasing into the city of Jacksonville. In connection with that cost of service study, there was an old legacy discount that had been offered under the GS XLD tariff. That's the GS General Service Extra Large Demand tariff. That was a discount associated with providing streetlight service, and it's no longer supported by the cost of service. The new tariffs for streetlights will reflect the cost of providing the streetlight service, and so we recommend discontinuing that discount. The discontinuation of the discount and the realignment of cost of service do create an opportunity for us to address a rate category in the general service large demand rate, where we actually have an opportunity to reduce the energy rate in this GSLD rate category. This reduction would help improve JEA's competitive position for commercial rates and would continue to support economic development. We'd also like to recommend that the board consider some additional administrative changes to the tariff. One is changing the language of what we call our fixed charge for each month, and this is in response to feedback from our customers, that they found the most illustrative and least confusing term for that charge was a basic monthly charge, and so we recommend changing the name of it in both the electric and the water tariff to basic monthly charge. We also recommend, in connection with our continuing support of economic development, that we extend our economic development program. It's currently scheduled to expire this year. We recommend extending it through September of 2018 to give more businesses the opportunity to take advantage of that discounted electric rate when they are able to meet the requirements of the economic development program. And just as a reminder, the requirement is a new 300 kilowatts of demand or an additional expansion of 300 kilowatts, along with the addition of at least 15 employees in our service territory. Separately from the rate hearing, our fuel charges do not require a rate hearing to be adjusted. But simultaneously with the rate hearing next month, we're also recommending that the board consider a reduction in our fuel rate. And so that would be an additional agenda item outside of the rate hearing for July.
This new GSLD rate, does it completely cover our costs,
It would, yes.
including overhead?
Yes, yes. The GSLD rate is different than a residential rate in that it consists of primarily of two components. There's a demand component and there's an energy component. And the demand component is sized to reflect the fixed cost of providing service to a GSLD customer because it is sized based on a customer's demand. It's actually somewhat similar to the structures that we've been exploring and considering for the residential and small commercial rate restructuring.
Will this end up being an increase for the city in total costs for the city lights?
That's a great question. The total bill for the city with respect to streetlights is likely to increase for in the coming years, and part of that is the updated count of streetlights. There were about 3,000 streetlights that we've not been billing the city for that'll now be added, coupled with the discontinuation of the discount. To offset that, though, they'll be the recipients of the decrease in the fuel rate if the board implements that next month, and they'll have the opportunity to do the conversions to LED over time, which will help also to offset some of that increase. But net, it will be an increase.
I'd like to also suggest that we consider increasing the basic monthly charge at the time we reduce the fuel rate. And I'd ask that you consider that at least.
We will do that. Thank you.
Okay. By all accounts, we're low.
Mhm.
As indicated by Ms. Dykes' presentation, JEA has an ongoing program to update and expand its rate options to provide customers with more rate choices for their utility services. JEA always strives to balance three goals: encourage efficient use of electricity that reduces costs for customers, and improve system utilization, provide customers with greater rate stability over time, and stabilize JEA revenue while minimizing impact on customer bills. Is there a motion?
So moved.
Second. Any further discussion?
Just one follow-up to the board member Bauer mentioned. So with respect to July 21st and the fuel charge being recommended, we would vote on it at the July 21st meeting?
That's correct. The action item for today is to call the hearing for next month.
Right, so if we did want to explore being able to increase the base rate at the next meeting, is that possible from the timeline that you're working on right now to come back to us on July 21st?
I believe it is. Let me just confirm that with Jody. I think that when we call for the rate hearing, we have the ability to change the items that are listed in the things that might be addressed in the rate hearing, as long as all of those items are considered as part of the public hearing. But let me just confirm that with Jody. Yeah.
So our vote today doesn't lock you into a certain number of issues? Okay.
It may be possible to increase the basic charge, reduce the fuel charge, and still have the customer come out ahead, or at least even. So we may want to consider that at that time.
Has the staff concluded its analysis on what the basic monthly charge should be?
Right now, we were not recommending a change in the basic monthly charge. We were deferring changing the fixed piece until we work through the whole process of looking at residential rate restructuring and potentially exploring something
I
like
just see
demand.
this as an opportunity with the potential reduction in the fuel charge.
It could be, and we're happy to show the analytics on it. I think what we'll find is that for very low consumption customers, even with the lower fuel rate, it's not gonna create that much headroom to be able to increase the fixed charge without a total bill increase, but we're happy to look at the analytics on it.
Okay.
Can't to look.
And I would ask that at least the board consider that we would do the evaluation at the next meeting and share the analytics, that we wouldn't rush to go ahead and approve that we would look towards sort of the fall to give us sufficient time to communicate with customers and the community before we went forward with a residential rate increase, because no matter how small that increase might be, there'll be some disproportion in terms of the analytics that we've looked at thus far between low usage and high usage, and we just need to fine tune that message should we go in that direction.
Madam Chair.
Sure, yes.
So, with respect to that was also kind of where I was going is, does it make sense for us to, look at all the other issues except for the fuel charge, push that out a couple months so we can at least see the analysis on the base rate and have both the base rate analysis and the fuel charge come to us at the same time?
I think that's
something to consider.
I think that's a possibility, that we can probably do what's recommended here and then come, in a couple of months, because we do have, from the fuel perspective, I think even the recommendation might be sort of to start with the budget year, which would give us a couple of months, July, August. We would have to make the decision in August to give us the appropriate amount of time to reprogram the computer to get the right pricing out to our customers. So maybe the way to do that would be to have this public hearing in isolation as recommended, but then make the commitment that we come back next month or the month after and start the dialogue in terms of sharing with the board the complexity of the movement of that base charge and really what the implications are and which class of customers are affected. The challenge that we've had, and I know it sounds really, really simple to move that charge, but what happens is we end up increasing rates for the low users and reducing rates for the large users. And while income doesn't necessarily tie completely with usage, and we talked about that earlier, and we absolutely agree with that, there is certainly a perception and some level of that in terms of usage does tie to income. So the low users, fixed income, would end up getting an increase. The high users, or the mid to high income, would end up getting a decrease. And that just is a challenge that we, quite frankly, have hit a stone wall on in terms of how to get the algorithm to appropriately distribute the cost and the benefit.
Well, to a degree, that's gonna be a board decision as well, as
Yes.
to whether we wanna move in that direction or
Yes.
not. So, we may have to consider that. But there's also, the possibility of doing this in smaller incremental steps. Even if we wanted to double it, which would still be relatively low, we might be able to do it over a period of time rather than doing it all at once, and may avoid some of what Paul's concerned about. But we'll wait for the analytics.
Yeah, Mr. Chair, I know it's been a while since we've increased the rate, right? I would recommend, in addition to getting the analytics that would point to where we should and how much and when, but if we look back from a best practices perspective, there's a communication element not only within the board here that needs an education component, but also an education component and communication strand that goes to our constituents, as well as the folks on the city council and administration, that need to be, it's not just us making a decision, but it's informing and educating everyone else so they'll know why we made the decision and the analytics behind it, right? Because if you go out there naked, right, and just do it without that piece, the repercussions are never good. So I don't know if, in addition to the analytics that you'll do, if we could go back from a communications perspective and from a lessons learned to make sure that if we made a mistake in a rollout from an increase in the past, that we don't repeat it. We've got a new board. None of us have been on the board when we've done this before, but we don't have to go out as neophytes on this because history is there, and we owe it to ourselves to go ahead and do that. So if we could do that, I'd strongly recommend we do that.
At the same time, we have suffered from not basically stabilizing or having a rate structure that helps stabilize our rate. And we have not been recovering our fixed costs adequately with just the variable costs. As usage has gone down, so have our revenues much more dramatically than they have in some other power systems. And we can fix that over time.
Absolutely, and I agree, and that's part of the message that I'm talking about that needs to be to the community at large. They need to understand the rationale behind it.
That's right.
I think two things there. One, just to make sure that we're open in the consideration, we can look and propose any adjustment would be made in very small increments over time, or larger increments, or at once, and there's pros and cons to both. And then secondarily, the one thing that we did learn in terms of the experience of the OOs, in terms of pricing adjustments, multiple adjustments over multiple years without aggressively communicating up front was not a formula for success. So we've got to get out in front. We've got to be very aggressive about our communication and the reasons why we're doing this and the value created, and then go through that process.
Yes.
But that is one absolute lesson learned, that we just sort of went forward and pushed the rate button because we needed to. I mean, but we didn't get out in front of it.
Right.
All right. Any further discussions? All in favor of the public hearing for next month, say aye.
Aye.
Motion carries. Thank you, Melissa. Next up, we have a strategy implementation update by Vicki Cavey.
Good afternoon.
Good
I am so
afternoon.
glad to be here today. And we are going to review for the board members, and especially for our new board members who weren't here when we implemented this strategy, what we are doing and, more importantly, how we're doing it, because it's been extremely successful. Well, let's talk about, let me tell you, your presentation, the order was changed briefly, so you should have a new one there if you want to follow along. Whenever I think about corporate strategy, I think about Dilbert. Look at Dilbert. How does my project fit into our company's overall strategy, he asked the pointy hair boss. And the pointy hair boss beats me. I didn't even know we had a strategy. So he goes home to his dog. Never ask a question you don't want to hear the answer. And of course, Dog Bert, that's why I never say, how are you? What's true here is a lot of times in big corporations, strategies are made, they're put in a big book, they're developed and set on the shelf, and the pointy hair bosses forget they even had it, and the employees don't know how they fit in. So let's look where JEA was back in January of 2013. We had a new CEO in Paul. He set up a new org structure. We had a new Chief Human Resources Officer, a new CFO, and pretty soon we had a new CIO. We had a lot of business realities that you all are well familiar with. Declining sales, customer expectations were very high. We had unprecedented mandates from the feds and a lot of changes going on. We needed to drive change. We needed to get alignment and a sense of urgency throughout the utility. Basically, we needed to get a strategy and fast. We researched and chose a method called Accelerated Corporate Transformation, or ACT, and we ran with it. We chose it because it focuses, aligns, communicates, and executes with every employee in the company. We get clearly understood strategy, and really the big thing, an enduring shift in culture and leadership practices. We wanted rapid quantum improvements, and in 3 areas, and no more than 3 areas is what we decided and what best practices were. Loyal customers, sustainable business excellence, skilled and satisfied employees is what we chose to focus on. ACT also empowers all of us to learn to confront those realities, focus of the organization, follow through on execution, because it is a Trojan horse for leadership development. We don't know it, but as we cascade this through the organization and learn about it and communicating it, we are all learning about the business across the board, not just in our silos. And that is very, very important throughout the organization. Here's the flow chart we had. I put this in here just so you would know. We took 9 months to develop our strategy. 9 full months. We had a board workshop with a number of you and worked on it very hard. We worked with our union leadership, and we worked with the senior leadership team, as well as the extended leadership team here at JEA, which is the chiefs and their 65 directors. We came up with our mission, vision, and values. I like to focus on growth squared, which is professional growth of our employees, as well as the growth of our business as one of our core values. Here are our initiatives. Under each one of these initiatives, we have 3 areas of focus that we'll go into later. This is the back of a card that all of our employees have. So now we have all this plan in place. Now how do we make it work? How do we focus, align, communicate, and execute? Generate enormous energy and keep it on the front burner, not a book on the shelf. Something called, and we have implemented it well, a rapid all employee high engagement cascade, meaning everyone is involved in hearing the message. We came up with a schedule to do these every quarter, so every employee hears how we're doing and what we're doing every single quarter. We set up our teams for each one of those strategic initiatives. This is what I like to call the HR team of Hires and Roach, focused on developing an unbeatable team. Under business excellence, I like to call these the WJEA team because they look like classic newscasters, and they do a fabulous job in business excellence, of Melissa and Ted. And under earned customer loyalty, here's the M&M team of Mike and Monica. I'm also going to put the word me in there because everything with customer loyalty will involve me and all the me's in the room. So Mike and Monica. Our CIO and Chief Public Affairs Officer served on the support team for that. You'll note we paired a newer employee with a long-term employee to get their faces out. They represent each one of those strategies and videos and throughout the organization. We had our annual strategy launch. When you walk into a room, there's 300 people there, the first 3 levels of management. They have the presentation, they have what they're going to work on to establish their commitments to action or goals, and what we're going to do for the day. It's an all-day event at UNF. You walk in, and here's how the room looks. It's done very professionally, very well, and I'll go over how we do it. So at our launch, our co-champions do a presentation on what our initiatives are, what our commitments to action are, and what we're planning on doing in the next year. We do table work. Each table is set up with a director and their direct reports, so they work through their commitments. They develop their individual commitments to action and report those out. Paul, as the CEO, moderates that, and then we come back and we do it every quarter within the organization. The reactions at our strategy launches in October of each year have been tremendous. You can see the happy faces, and we videotape it so that we can share that throughout the organization. We also give these directors and managers toolkits to go back so they can communicate effectively to their employees. We come back and we do the same thing with our employees. This is T19 set up for a cascade for about 60 people. This is done throughout the organization all the way down, so anyone who has direct reports does a cascade with their directs. A wonderful thing that we've implemented here are employee success stories. We bring people in from throughout the organization to tell their stories on what they did on a personal basis or in a team basis, and these are just some snapshots. I love the one down here. We got Mike actually laughing. If you see the guy with the hard hat, he's talking about how he goes to schools and takes hard hats and coloring books, and he thought it was going to be kind of silly, but the kids love it and he loves doing it. Joy Guto's talking about going out to a school. Others talking about our senior days here at JEA and a multitude of other projects. Tim Carter, who did the safety update for you this morning or this afternoon, he was one of our success stories. He actually worked with a customer who had a problem with a pole in the middle of an auto repair shop and got that taken care of because he took responsibility, even though he works at Northside, for customer satisfaction. And of course, Dorothy with the smiles. Everybody loves to have their story heard. Everybody wants to be part of a winning team, and that's why we like them to share their success stories and share them throughout the organization. We also have our SharePoint site where you can watch all the videos every quarter, whatever you want to see. And we also have a video of our partner that we used in finding and implementing ACT. They now use Innovation Partners, uses JEA as an example of world-class cascading. I put in your packets some of our outcome metrics. I think you know most of these. In our employee satisfaction, we've implemented our employee satisfaction initiative with 9 teams working on 14 different initiatives. We can't wait to see that. We want to get a 10% improvement in our satisfaction ratings from our employees. Here we have our metrics for engaging employees in personal growth. We've implemented something that we didn't even know existed practically here at JEA, individual development plans. 95% of our management employees now have individual development plans. What am I going to do to better myself? And we are working and have a goal to have our employees have them by the end of the year, most of our employees. And 50% overall participation in cultural competency, which is very important, and we're well on track with that. Here, our wellness participation, our safety numbers we know are struggling a little bit. Our ethics compliance is phenomenal. Under delivered business excellence, I'm very proud of our new revenue task force that we set in place here under growing revenues. We have implemented about 5 new ways to get our revenues up, and timber has been a huge success story. Here, I put in the updated number. We have collected $2.2 million in new revenues, most of it from timber, which is extraordinary. And we expect to get our money in the water production and the unbilled production and electric. Look at that, we're already at $2.2 million from unbilled revenue. That's phenomenal. And then our cost efficiency, I don't have to tell you about that. It's unbelievable that we've done all of this by keeping our costs at 2012 levels and no new debt. And also our performance numbers. I don't have to review with you how good those are. We are doing phenomenal. Under earned customer loyalty, I don't think I have to say anything here. We have gone from worst to first, and that is remarkable in 18 short months since we implemented our strategy. It's phenomenal. Here's what I just want to remind you where we're going to be. We have our next cascade coming up on July 29th, and then on October 8th, we will relaunch a newly updated, perhaps tweaked strategy. We'll be working on that in the next 6 months. Now back to Dilbert. Now a hacker's broke into our system and found out our corporate strategy. Dilbert wants to know, did he post it on the internet? I'd like to read it. I'm also curious about my objectives for this year. Do you have the guy's email address? Well, I want to assure you that that is not JEA's problem. JEA's employees know how we fit into our strategy and are making it work. Thank you.
Thank you, Vicki. Okay, we'll move on to our proposed fiscal year 2016 operating capital budgets. Ms. Stikes.
Hello again. In your packet, in your board packet, I'll just do a quick walkthrough of the information that's included there. Behind the agenda item itself, there's the consolidated operating budget for the fiscal year 2016 on the first page. On the next page, there's the consolidated capital budget. The third page is the 5-year capital improvement program. The fourth page is the St. John's River Power Park and Plant Shear operating and capital budgets. And then the last section is the cover letter that will be sent to Council President along with the attachment of our budget. There have been very few changes since we reviewed this budget in detail with the Finance and Audit Committee and the board last month, and I'll briefly walk through those changes in just a moment. But first wanted to just touch on a couple highlights. The operating budget for fiscal year 2016 is about $26 million lower than fiscal 15, and it's lower for the third year in a row. There is an estimated fuel rate decrease in the budget, and otherwise there are no rate changes in either system that are included in our budget for next year. Our budget does include government transfers of almost $235 million for next year. Our capital budget is funded with no new debt for all of our capital additions. And in fact, there's a $169 million debt reduction that's scheduled as part of our budget for next year. The budget provides for financial metrics which enable us to meet our rating agency commitments, and also provides funding for key strategic issues, along with continued rigorous and disciplined focus on workplace safety, and funding for compliance, security, and enterprise risk management. Like I said, there are very few changes since we reviewed this budget in detail, but I will just highlight the three that are in here. Two of them relate to the calculation of city contribution. The total city contribution is unchanged from the budget that we reviewed in May, but city contribution expense is a function of sales, and sales through last month. And so that calculation is typically updated in connection with this presentation to the board and was updated this year. So the change that you'll see there is there was a decrease in city contribution expense in the electric system of $388,416. That corresponds with an increase in city contribution from the water and sewer system by $388,416. So the total remains the same.
Now, that is the franchise fee, right?
That's city contribution. So the total city contribution for next year is $114.1 million, and that gets divided up between electric and water proportionately based on sales. So that split gets calculated sort of at the last minute as we finalize our budget. The balance for that within our budget, so that we do present a balanced budget, is deposits in the operating capital outlay. And so you'll see in the case of the electric system an increase of $388,000 in OCO, and a decrease in the water and sewer system to offset that increase in contribution. The other change in the budget, since we discussed it in detail in May, is on the capital page. And the consolidated capital budget, which is the third page of the budget package that's provided to you, the capital number for the district energy system has increased by $2 million. And that was to respond to some potential downtown development projects that would be served potentially by the district energy system, such as service to the stadium or potentially a shipyards development. And so that's been included in the capital budget for next year. And otherwise, the numbers are unchanged since our detailed review in May. Any questions about JEA's budget?
Melissa, is there anything in here about corporate headquarters or any investments in that for next year?
There is, and I don't have the detailed line items with me, but I perhaps could look at Dave and he could look it up while we're talking. There is a dollar amount that's included in the capital budget for the electric system as essentially exploratory money to do some design and preliminary engineering work for something that might work for a solution for the corporate headquarters. Regardless of what we end up ultimately doing from a facilities perspective, we have to do something. We have some very significant end-of-life issues that are within this building, so we'll either make plans and do engineering and design to repair those things or make some other sort of plan, and there are some dollars that are earmarked in the capital budget for either of those solutions.
Is there another plan coming forward then for a longer-term solution?
Yeah, we're continuing to work through the analysis on that to come up with the best and most responsible thing for us to do for our employees and our customers.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
I'm sure. So, assuming later this calendar year, we change the fuel charge. You've got fuel expenses on here for fuel and purchase power. Obviously, the revenue would go down, so how would you keep that? Or are you planning when you come in with the fuel charge to also say your forecast for fuel expenses is also decreasing?
Not typically. That's a great question. What we've done in terms of construction of the budget for next year is we've budgeted around a $41 fuel rate for 2016. And that at this point is our best guess in terms of a recommendation for a fuel rate for the board to consider. We are continuing to do some analytics around that to see if there's another solution that might make sense in terms of the overall fuel rate for next month's consideration or when we ultimately consider it. But the budget is constructed around a lower fuel rate than our existing.
And what is it today?
$43.60.
And then on the natural gas pass-through revenue, that's the new business that we're going into now, right, Paul?
Mm-hmm.
That's correct.
Just for me to understand that, what's the volume what's that business have to generate from a volume perspective to hit 12.5 million? Is that a conservative number? Is that an aspirational number? Is that how does $12.5 million? I have no idea how to.
My best guess, based on what we're seeing now in terms of adoption rate in natural gases, that's probably a little bit aggressive. But we wanted to give ourselves sufficient room to be able to serve customers that do sign up for that service.
Okay. That's all I have, Madam Chair.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else have any questions? Thanks. At this time, I ask for a motion to approve the budget as presented.
So moved.
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Budget passes.
Thank you. That's the culmination of a lot of work. from my
I
team, so
know, good
congratulations.
job. Okay, now we'll have the bi-monthly finance presentation.
Okay. The key financial metrics year-to-date are looking healthy in both systems. And remember, as we go through this presentation, this will come up as a recurring theme, that the single biggest driver of sales within any given year is weather. So we've had some weather that's pretty conducive to sales in both systems, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. But it is driving very healthy performance in all of our financial metrics for the year. So debt service coverage in the electric system is forecast at 2.6 times. Days of liquidity, 276 days, of which 160 of those are cash, and our debt to asset ratio is at 72%. In the water and sewer system, forecasted debt service coverage at 2.8 times, with 232 days of liquidity, of which 116 are cash, and debt to asset ratio of 54% forecast in that system. And what you'll see in this chart when we talk about sales is while the trend still points downward, you'll see a significant bump up for the forecast for this fiscal year. What we've seen in terms of degree days so far is they've been about 5% higher than last year to date. And if the weather that we're seeing outside today, and that's forecast for the remainder of June, is any indication, that trend is going to continue. June's been a very hot month so far. So we're seeing year-to-date sales of about 2.3% year-over-year. Total forecast at 1.7% over last year, but I do expect that to increase with the results from June. Number of customers are up about 2% in terms of total number of accounts. So this is driven both by account growth and by some increase in consumption per account, which is a reflection of weather. From a financial performance perspective, you'll see in the first line here, we've got fuel revenue that is below the budgeted revenue for this year. However, that does include the $50 million fuel credit that we were able to refund back to customers last month. And from a total revenues perspective, we're running about $9 million under budget. But again, that includes the $50 million fuel credit. Skipping down to expenses, the fuel expenses are coming in, as we've been seeing over the past number of months, lower than budget. Our O&M expenses are running under budget, as our non-fuel purchase power. So from a net revenues perspective, our net revenues are up or about $50 million over budget. And we'll talk to the board about this in the coming months, but this could create some opportunities for some additional bond buyback in the electric system to help reduce some of that debt load that we've got outstanding. From a capital perspective, capital expenditures are forecast at $132 million in the electric system, and debt service at $182. From a cost metrics perspective, non-fuel expenses are looking quite good, and the fuel fund is now projected to have an ending balance of $146 million. And again, that's after the $50 million fuel credit that we've offered to customers. In the water and sewer system, we're seeing a similar weather-driven story in the water and sewer system. Rainfall's down significantly this year. We're down 9 inches. Number of days of rain are down about 17 days from last year. So although our number of accounts is only up about 2.5% in the water and sewer system, our total sales year-to-date are up more than 7%. And a lot of that, as you see in the bottom right-hand corner of this page, is driven by irrigation. And again, with the hot, dry weather that we've had so far in June, we're expecting that trend to continue in water. So from an overall financial performance perspective, revenues are running actually a little over budget in the water system. Net revenues, again, a little bit over budget, which may create some opportunity in the water and sewer system to, again, buy back bonds there. And then from a cost metrics perspective, both water and sewer cost metrics are looking good versus our target.
You know, Melissa, you've been kind of drawing a trend line over the past few years. Does it now appear that we're kind of bottoming out on that trend line? I mean, it's no longer a negative slope, it's probably at least a zero slope.
You know, that's a question I ask myself all the time, is trying to figure out where the bottom is of that trend. I think so much of what we're seeing this year is driven by weather that it's really hard to say, frankly,
It's
whether
premature.
whether it's a change.
Okay.
If I were to give a gut feel, I'd say we probably are flattening out. But the big unknown on the horizon is distributed generation. So while that may not affect our forecast for the next 2, 3, 4 years, when I look out 5 years, that's the potential sea change in the industry that may really continue to drive that sales trend downward. So it's the looking 5 years out that becomes the big challenge.
You're falling right into my argument for improving the rate structure.
You're welcome. The debt and debt to asset ratios, we've spent some time talking about this page in the past. What I did want to touch on, though, was a question that came up during the last finance presentation, which was, how do we get to the green line? How do we get to the targets for debt to asset ratios for each of the systems? And I deferred the answer to that question to this meeting because it is a little bit of a dynamic question, because our assets aren't static. We're depreciating our assets every year, and so as those roll off along with our debt, we really had to look at that ratio over time to get the accurate answer to that question. So if you look at our capital forecast for the electric system, which is relatively low and has been stabilizing because we are in this low growth period, what you see is we need about a reduction of about $845 million to get to the debt to asset ratio that's equal to our peers. It's about 53%. So if we kept our assets static and paid that off and didn't have any change on the asset side, we would get there in 2022. If you look at the roll-off and depreciation, though, coupled with the capital additions that we've got in our forecast every year, and then look at the regularly scheduled principal repayments that we've got, in order for us to get to 53% in the electric system, that doesn't happen until 2036. So we're still a pretty long way away from getting to a debt to asset ratio that's more commensurate with our peers at our credit rating. Water is a better story. The peer median has actually increased a little bit over the last couple of years to about 50%. So if you use 50% as our bogey, based on our current capital forecast coupled with our depreciation in the water and sewer system, we think we'll get there probably in about 2018. So not that far from now, and then it'll be a bit of a different discussion in terms of the aggressive debt paydown strategy. So that's good news in water, but we're a long way away in electric. Combined debt outstanding, the weighted average interest rates are continuing.
So am I to understand that as we reduce our asset base, our debts become a higher and higher percentage if nothing else changes?
Mm-hmm.
By 2036, what would be the outstanding debt then? I mean, estimate.
That is a great question. I have a panicked staff member in the back. Let me follow up on the answer to that question, and I can get back to you on that. It is a pretty low balance.
Yeah,
It's
that's
a low
right.
asset balance and a low debt balance, but I don't remember off the top of my head what it is.
Yeah, the thing about it is, we have to remember, we do need a manageable debt structure. We don't have to get to zero. This is a utility.
Mhm.
Does have reasonably secure revenues, but it does have to get down to a point where we're not gonna get killed if interest rates start rising, and that's where we were a few years ago. And we've done a great job of pulling it down, you all have. But we don't have to get to zero.
No, that's a great point. In fact, among the investor-owned community for electric utilities, the typical debt-to-asset ratio is about 50%.
Yeah, I'd say we could probably be a little higher and still be okay.
Variable rate debt risk analysis, we continue to monitor this portfolio closely, but no major issues to report to the board at this time. And we are seeing a little bit of uptick in yield on the investment portfolio, which is on the right-hand side of this page, although rates still remain very low for investments. And all of this feeds into where we are from a rates perspective. Unfortunately, last time I was up here, I reported that we had dropped down very significantly in the electric system by comparison to our peers around the state. And fortunately for the customers of two other systems, there have been some rate decreases around the state that have caused us to move our relative position. So we have Key West and Tallahassee that have moved to the other side of us at this point, and we're back closer to the median on electric, and right at the median on water and sewer.
Melissa, we've discussed in the past that we keep a number of reserves out there and liquidity that help us meet our need to keep a AA credit rating. As we continue to reduce our debt, is there a point where we can use some of those reserves to even further reduce our debt and then not have to have the reserves to maintain our credit rating? In other words, it's a positive win-win. And where is that number? It might be an interesting exercise to figure out where that number is.
Yeah, I'll just say academically, absolutely. That's exactly the goal of what we're doing. It's expensive to keep cash. We've just talked about
Yeah,
rates that we're
'cause
earning on the investment side.
getting nothing for it. Cost of money is a multiple of that.
Yeah. So we do, on a small scale, every time we repay debt or every time we reduce our balances outstanding, we also reduce the reserve funds associated with those balances that we're required to keep in our debt service reserve funds.
But is there a tipping point where we get a real benefit?
I believe there is, but let me do some follow-up on that question.
Thank you.
Academically, that is definitely where we're headed.
If I could just make a comment about this chart, if you look at the utility charges alone, we're not so bad, but once you add all the taxes and other charges, that really moves us.
Yes,
So.
that's a great observation.
I
But believe
like
me,
the
our
purple
customers
line.
don't notice that.
That's where education comes in.
I know, but I like the purple bar part.
Me too.
The people pay the total bill.
Any other questions?
Just going back on the fuel fund, can you remind me, Melissa, how do we, what's the minimum that we have to have in that account? How is that calculated?
Under our pricing policy, it's equal to 15% of our highest 12 months of fuel expenses, so it's about $95 million.
So the 146 we have right now, the
50.
minimum we need in there is 98.
That's right. And as we look at making recommendations for the fuel rate, one of the things we look at is the fuel forecast and then sensitivities around the fuel forecast so that we can bleed that balance down over time to try to balance lowering the rate as much as we can with providing rate stability for our customers. And we can talk about that more when we get to making the decision about the rate.
Nope, that's right. I just was looking for that number.
Any other questions for Melissa?
Thank you.
Thank you. Next, we'll have a presentation about JEA hurricane readiness by Ed Dendar, Director of Emergency Preparedness.
Thank you. It's not going to be as exciting as the charts and graphs from the finance group, but here we go. Good afternoon, Madam Chair, board members.
Good
Councilman
afternoon.
Bishop just left, and fellow employees and guests. I'm Ed Dendor, the Director of Emergency Preparedness for JEA. My bio is included in your packet of information. I appreciate the opportunity to circle back and follow up with you from the midst of our statewide hurricane exercise we had performed last month. Emergency preparedness role is to prepare JEA's entire team to respond to any threats. Similar to combination lock, I'll also share with you this year's NOAA hurricane predictions. The number that you see in the centers are 11, 6, and 2. I'll explain those numbers a little bit more detail at the end of the presentation. Last month, you heard about JEA's advanced efforts in preparation for the storm. Today, I'll give you a little more definition on how JEA integrates our efforts with the region as we respond. Then I'll show a short video outlining last month's week-long exercise followed by NOAA's hurricane forecast for the season. Last month, John McCarthy touched briefly on the National Incident Management System, or NIMS. This systematic structure transforms how JEA leads its crews and response efforts. The Incident Command Team is scalable and flexible So far this fiscal year, we have activated 13 times for incidents ranging in size from threats of Ebola, tornadoes, fires, gas leaks, and collapse of the riverbank along Liberty Street. With this system, we're well integrated with the city to organize mutual aid and response while maintaining a unified response and command. Using this approach, JEA has implemented the best industry practices, all while delivering a common message. Here's a 4-minute video of the multi-day hurricane drill JEA participated in last month. Planning and integrating this effort and drill took a better part of the last 5 months. So if we can. Nope. Oop. Where you going, Russ? There we go. Bottom left-hand corner. Give me the drive. There we go.
Day one of JEA's 2015 hurricane exercise. A storm called Gibson is heading straight to Florida. Employees are told to be prepared both personally and professionally.
The storm is located just north of Hispaniola, about 960 miles southeast of Miami. Moving at northwest at 13 miles an hour. It's a Category 3 storm with 150 mile an hour gusts up to 125.
Day two. Gibson is now a Category 4 storm. The entire Florida Peninsula is under a hurricane warning. JEA's senior leadership team begins turning their hurricane plans into action.
We've also started our advanced proactive communication to our customers through our social media, through our website, IVR messages for people that are calling in, really informing them what to expect with water and sewer, what is our priority process and how we restore and what should they be doing.
The key issue is on the right now or not, and we'll make a decision in 24 hours. Hurricane 1, we're right out right now. Hurricane 2, certainly a strong Hurricane 2 is concerned. Right now we're being boarded up, and so therefore we need to start preparing if we need to move some of our control functions over to the side.
Day 3, JEA activates its Emergency Operations Center, and the Incident Command Team works to restore utility services. Gibson has been downgraded to a Cat 1, but it's still off the coast, still dumping rain in northeast Florida. Powers out to 80,000 JEA customers. 60,000 are without water. 35,000 have no sewer service. Each JEA section chief completes a status report called a 201 on SharePoint.
Documentation is such an important part of this exercise, and such an important thing for us to flex as part of this exercise. Because it's the only way that we're going to get reimbursed in the event of a disaster, which could cost customers millions of dollars if we do it wrong. Luckily, this year we've rolled out an automated documentation process, which we've been able to use during this exercise. That'll be a really powerful tool to enable us to meet FEMA's increasingly stringent and increasingly onerous documentation requirements during a disaster.
Suddenly, an emergency request comes from the county EOC. 4 assisted living communities in Riverside need power in 6 hours, or hundreds of residents must be evacuated.
In this situation, everyone wants to be on or have power restored, water restored, sewer restored first. The physics of that just don't work. We've got to work our process and our plan. That said, it's really important to exercise and communicate among ourselves these special, extraordinary requests during these extraordinary times. And let's think about what we need to do to respond to this request.
Flooding makes it impossible to restore power to the assisted living communities in just 6 hours. Nevertheless, since this area includes a major hospital, troubleshooters are sent in to determine when power can be restored.
And during this process, we're really focused on communication, making sure each one of the units is communicating itself and the work and the task, but also its ability to understand who and how to communicate with the other parts of the organization, so we can restore as quickly as possible.
In the end, this multi-day exercise turned out to be the most realistic drill yet for JEA employees. Say JEA planners is just the point.
Based on the national standards, we're continually trying to elevate our capabilities through our exercises and drill program. Every year, you'll see a larger and larger opportunity for JEA to improve our planning and our response capabilities. So in summary, JEA, in collaboration with the city, other counties throughout the state, and the State of Florida's Emergency Management Watch Office, participated in this exercise. This year, JEA took the extra step in the exercise by reaching out and actually calling and working with our vendors to simulate an actual storm. We also are in the process of extensively exercising our damage assessment data collection process. So what does NOAA's numeric combination 11, 6, and 2 stand for? They predict 6 to 11 named storms, 3 to 6 of which could become hurricanes, and up to 2 major hurricanes. For the Atlantic Basin, they call for a 70% chance of a below average season, a 20% chance of an average season, and a 10% chance of an above average season. No matter the count, NOAA cautions that even a below average season can still be an active in terms of landfall and damage. Being prepared is crucial no matter the outlook. So I'd like to say thank you for the time and interest in how JEA responds to an incident, and for giving JEA the ability to prepare for the next time an incident actually does occur. Any questions?
Any questions?
Thank you.
Thank you. As the leading provider of electric, water, and wastewater services in our area, it is critical that JEA is prepared for any natural disaster such as hurricanes. As we are now into hurricane season, I'm glad to know that JEA is a leader in hurricane preparedness for our community. It should be a reassurance to our customers that JEA staff members can participate in hurricane preparedness drills and scenarios, and every employee knows his or her role in the event of a hurricane. Our skilled employees work hard to restore critical service immediately following a storm, always ensuring that the safety of our employees and citizens is the top priority. They also work hard to keep the community informed about service restoration efforts, further demonstrating JEA's commitment to the citizen it serves. So I thank you for that. At this time, I would like to call upon Bud Para, Chief Public Affairs Officer. As many of you know, Bud will be retiring on June 26th. Bud has been with JEA for 34 years and has been a tremendous asset in working with JEA stakeholders and regulators. And I have a little something to read in Bud's honor. Board of Directors Resolution of JEA, June 16, 2015. Whereas PG Bud Para has served JEA as a faithful employee for 35 years from November 11th, 1980 until June 26th of 2015, and whereas Bud began his career as a JEA engineer and progressed through the ranks to positions including JEA Engineer 2, JEA Professional Engineer, Supervisor Transmission, Distribution and Generation, Supervisor Generation, Corporate Model, and Florida Public Service Commission Interaction, Division Chief, System Planning, Director, SJRPP Fuel Management Services, Director, Legislative Affairs, and as Chief Public Affairs Officer. And whereas he has continuously held an engineering license in the state of Florida since July 1982, and whereas his colleagues, including direct reports, acknowledge him for being a good coach and mentor who has helped them to learn and grow in their job responsibilities. And whereas having touched every part of the company, he is recognized as an excellent negotiator, being patient, calm, and articulate, and using common sense approaches to resolve challenges and issues. And whereas he has provided major strategic, company, and customer-focused decision-making in every assignment throughout his career. And whereas his career highlights include major involvement in integrated resource planning, negotiation for the key strategic 500 kV transmission line siting and construction with FPL, navigation and execution, I think that's supposed to be negotiation, and execution of a contract for a significant beneficial byproducts reuse and location opportunity at St. John's River Power Park, negotiation of long-term beneficial fuel and fuel delivery contracts, and leading the study of regional transmission organizations. And whereas for JEA Government Affairs, Bud is recognized as a leader within its major industry associations in policy developments and advocacy work, where he worked on complex subject matters, helped form the Climate Policy Group, now known as AFFORD, chaired the LPPC Government Relations Task Force, chaired APPA's Legislative and Resolutions Committee, served as president for Florida Municipal Electric Association, was honored by the FMEA with its Member of the Year award in 2010, was honored in 2012 by APPA with the Alan Richardson Statesmanship Award, and whereas Bud, as Chief Public Affairs Officer, has provided steady, insightful guidance on environmental policy and issues, public policy, resource planning, negotiations, public relations issues, and has been a go-to advisor to many individuals. And whereas Bud and his contributions will be greatly missed by the JEA family, and he is wished well and recognized for the contributions he will continue to make to the community and others upon his much-deserved retirement. Now, therefore, be it resolved by the Board of Directors of JEA that it hereby expresses its deep gratitude and appreciation to PG Bud for his countless and lasting contributions as a JEA employee, unanimously adopted the 16th day of June 2015. Thank you so much, Bud, for all your, this is a mouthful, but it's all true, and we'll miss you greatly.
That's what you get when you stick around long.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. And is there any other new business? Oh, yes, there is some new business. In our pre-board meeting, we had a very good discussion about the feedback from the APPA conference. And I invite Vice Chair Bauer to continue to share his comments regarding his experience at the conference.
Okay. We went through the first section of these comments that I've handed out to everybody. But the basic thing on the charges is to better align our charges with the fact that we have a high level of fixed costs. So to get fixed charges aligned with fixed costs, variable charges aligned with variable costs. That's impossible to do 100%, but the way the more we can get them better aligned, the more stable our revenues and our coverage will be. And of course, we've realized over the past few years in declining sales how important that is. It's been much more stable on the water side because we have a better alignment. We just need to get there on this side. And I know we're going to try maybe some experiments down the road, but I still feel it's going to be necessary to have, as you know, I'm pushing for a slightly higher customer charge. And I'm not pushing for a high one. $10 would be maximum in my mind at this point, but we'll see if the board agrees, and we'll look at the analytics for that. Next down the list is the clean power rules, and there was a lot of significant discussion about this. Obviously, nobody knows what these are going to be, but the expectation is that most of the rules that we have seen, we're going to get. We're not going to get huge changes. We may get some state target changes. The glide path may change a little bit, but they're still going to be targets. We may get a slightly different treatment of nuclear energy, and we will probably have a baseline that's a multi-year baseline rather than just a single year. I think right now it's 2012 or something, and that's good for some people and bad for other people depending on weather or a lot of other factors. So they may go to a multi-line baseline, a multi-year baseline. And there's going to be probably a slightly different treatment of EE and RE, and I quite frankly forgot what those were. Do you know, Paul?
Energy efficiency and
Renewable energy.
Renewable. And there will be some safety valve in the regulations for ensuring reliable energy. They're not going to push us to the point where we damage the potential reliability of the grid system. So there is probably going to be some kind of a safety valve in there. But most of what we're seeing, we're probably going to get. I don't think there are going to be substantial changes to the basic structure. The other thing is distributed power. Accept it. It's coming. It's here. They're saying the smarter utilities are actually trying to get out in front of it and being participants rather than being victims of it. Over the past 10 years, they showed a national growth in electric usage of 0.45%. Some people have been thinking 1-2%. It's been essentially flat for the last 10 years. In our case, it's gone down, but 0.45%. They're saying because we're getting such a rapid change in technology that we can't use a 20 or 30-year timeline for making investment decisions anymore. We have to have a payback much faster. We just cannot believe or depend on the same asset being viable for that long a period of time. It may turn out to be, but the technological change is kind of indicating that it probably won't be. They're saying do cost of service studies frequently. Don't do them every 10, 20 years. Do them every few years. Know what it's costing you to provide the service. And where you can, unbundle the services. That is, you have transmission, you have power generation, you have basic costs of reading the meters, whatever. To the extent that you can, unbundle the services. Offset by the fact that you don't want to build it so complicated. So it's an art to creating the billing structure that everybody's satisfied with, but you can't have it too complicated. But at the same time, unbundle where you can. There's do a value of solar study from time to time, and I know we're doing it, but those numbers are moving quite dramatically. They continue to make great strides in efficiency of these solar panels. Demand side management. Obviously, that's something that we've been talking about here recently and potentially experimenting with some rate payment structure that involves demand side management. They think that there's a lot of economic potential there, and that utilities in general may be able to reduce the assets they need to have with good demand side management. They said fix the low income problem with low income tools, not do it with the rate. Something that we have to come up philosophically with a decision on that. And this new era of higher competition really takes the risk from the consumer and puts it on our backs. Up to this point, if power rates went up, our costs went up, the consumer was taking the risk. In the future, it's going to go the other way. The consumer will have more choices, and we will be taking a greater amount of the business risk in managing this electrical utility service. So plan on that. Some good ideas at the conference, and I thought it was very worthwhile, and I encourage, if some of my other board members have a chance to go next year, you should go.
Thank you, Mr. Bauer. Anybody else attend and would like to talk about their experience?
I just wanted to mention that as a new board member, I thought it was a really informative session, and I went to the one that was an all-day session on the kind of the ins and outs of the electric power industry, which for somebody new to the business gives you just enough information just to be dangerous with it. But it really helped clarify not only how the industry is put together, but also how the public power part is just a fraction of the big picture with investor-owned utilities. And I had no idea that what we did was 15% of all the power served to consumers, where the big portion was investor-owned. And then even among the public power utilities, that JEA is sort of a giant that stands out among, you know, a couple thousand smaller ones. So great overview. I did go to the sessions on the CO2 and again got some knowledge on that. But I did want to mention one of the other sessions I went to was how to measure the performance of your utility. And it was a lot of the discussion about metrics, dashboard, and I will say, just looking at what we went over in our sessions with utilities all throughout the country, that JEA has some of the best ones I've seen, and it seems to be a very good package. You know, the mantra was, you know, don't have 50 different things, kind of boil it down to a key set of metrics that you can look at and track, and I think the finance team and the operations team, with Paul's help, have done a really good job with that.
Hussein, do you have some comment?
No, I'm glad that Peter covered most of it. I think we all kind of recognize that once the rule comes out, and I think Peter kind of said this at the beginning of the Clean Power Plan, is nobody really knows what's coming out. I mean, everyone's guessing, and and somebody will be right because they will have guessed right. But we've got a lot of work on our end once that comes out to understand the, not just the, how we implement the rule, but also the, the fiscal impact. And so, as I was just kind of thinking about it from environmental committee standpoint, from a finance and audit committee standpoint, whether we do it as a board workshop or we do it where maybe it's a joint environmental finance and audit meeting, because both are going to go hand in hand. That's going to be something very important for us to get our arms around. It was hard to find anybody at the conference that that said that they were not going to be financially squeezed with the rule coming out. So put aside the policy beliefs, the political beliefs. If you just look at the business realities, nobody has a clear kind of magic way of being able to meet the rules in a way that's not going to impact, in their view right now, their customers from a rate perspective.
Rob, did you go?
I did not.
I did not. I
Next
did not.
year.
I couldn't either. So, well, I mean, I'll go ahead. Is there any other old business? Okay. Well, at this time, I'll turn it over to Secretary Winbush for a report on the Workforce Committee, as well as the report on the American Association of Blacks in Energy National Conference.
Thank you, Madam Chair. The Workforce Committee met on June 3rd. Board members present were myself and Lisa Weatherby, who attended by teleconference. We had a couple of action items, the first of which was approval of the committee minutes from January 13th. No action was taken, however, because of the lack of a quorum. Therefore, I would like to bring that before the board for approval of those minutes. I'd like to call for a motion from the board approving the minutes of January 13th, 2015 Workforce Committee meeting. And could entertain a motion.
So moved.
It's been moved in second. Any discussion? Hearing none, call the question. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? The motion carries. We also reviewed the Workforce Committee charter. Revisions were made to the committee charter to better align with the other JEA committee charters. This item was discussed in the committee, however, no action was taken due to lack of a quorum. I would like also to call for a motion to approve the revised Workforce Committee charter, and would entertain that motion now.
So moved.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, I'll call the question. All in favor say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion carries. All right, the committee was also provided a quarterly workforce update and a presentation on diversity, inclusion, and succession outreach strategy by Angie Hires, Chief Human Resources Officer. Copies of the presentations are included in the board package. The committee will schedule its next meeting in the fall, and I'd like to thank everyone for receiving these minutes. I'd also like to go ahead and move into the ABE National Conference, and you're probably saying,
Before you
yes.
do that, can I just,
Sure.
who are the committee members on this? board members on this committee again?
Myself as chair and Lisa Weatherby, and I think it's up in the air, there's the third we're entertaining.
And the reason, I think the reason for my question is, I saw you didn't have a quorum, and so, is that gonna be, have we kind of staffed the committee to make sure that that doesn't happen?
John, what committee are you on?
I think I was just appointed to one. What was it, the,
Are you
was
on
that
the
one?
environmental?
Well, he's on
It
the
was envi-
finance committee.
Somebody's
Yeah,
on the
finance
finance
and,
committee.
I think it was environmental that I just ended up
You're
on.
on environmental? Okay, well, we'll look at that and make some changes.
All the new board members are on finance
Right.
committee.
Right.
Okay, we'll look at that and get you some numbers.
Yeah. It was the first meeting after our retreat, so I think some of the assignments
Just
have
make
not
sure
yet
that we
been
don't,
made yet.
you don't go into the next meeting without a full
That would
slate.
be a good thing.
Yep.
All right. Okay. All right. Any other questions on that? Thanks for the question. ABE. Say, what is ABE? ABE is an acronym that stands for the American Association of Blacks in Energy. During the first week in May 5th through the 8th, I attended the 2015 ABE National Conference in Charlotte, North Carolina. Just by way of history, ABE was formed in 1977 in the wake of our energy crisis here. And the mission of the association is a National Association of Energy Professionals that was founded solely for the purpose to ensure the input of African Americans and other minorities into discussion and development of energy policies, regulations, R&D, technologies, and environmental issues. As part of that, they focus on educating, promoting energy awareness in careers, and they also have a arm that is involved in lobbying. At the national conference, we also have a Florida chapter here. There's 70-plus members. Member companies include JEA, Next Era Energy, Duke Energy, Orange County Utilities, Siemens Utility, Gainesville Regional Utilities. At the conference, there are approximately 400 people in attendance. Companies represented included yours truly, JEA, Duke Energy, Siemens, but also Chevron, Shell Oil, and several contractors as well. Florida attendees were 15, of which we had about 5 or 6 that played an integral role right here from JEA. The agenda included many forums, which also included a youth camp. In other words, they took the first day and they bussed some kids in from the energy magnet schools, and they did a forum for them from energy awareness and also to promote the energy industry as a potential career. There were 30 workshops and journal sessions, had 50 conference speakers. They also, as a fundraising arm, there was awarded a $3,000 scholarship for students who pursue engineering in the energy fields going into college. There are several forums that I sat on. I actually sat on a board, a chat with the directors where they looked at folks who were sitting on the boards of some of these energy companies. And there were 4 of us there, and I was the only one that was sitting on a nonprofit board. And I joked, and so I'm going to pass the cup around when we're finished, because they were sitting on some major boards, and let me put things into perspective. This is kind of funny to me. One was describing the work of the board, and says, well, during our retreat, they picked us up in the corporate jet, and they flew us through a 5-star resort for 3 days. And after that, they flew us home, and I said, well, our retreat was at the public library. So that puts things into perspective for us all. And I came back even more humble than I am. Thank you. But it was a great exchange and dialogue of interest, energy, and policies. For example, one of the national board meetings always coincides with the meeting of the Congressional Black Caucus, in which they leverage that opportunity to lobby and make sure they promote things of interest to folks in the communities that they serve. On a final note, yours truly was elected to the national board of ABE, so I'll be serving in that capacity going forward. That's not foreign territory for us, because when Yoni Kendrick served as a national board member during her tenure here, and will continue to serve in a very visible and noticeable way in support of ABE. And Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
Very good. Well, thank you for representing JEA so efficiently and humbly. At this time, I'd ask our managing director and CEO for his report.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple of notes for the board. We are meeting with and participating in the transition task forces that the mayor has set up with his team. So what we've done is assign senior executives from JEA for all of the relevant task force, and we're attending and available to help in any way we can. We have the council orientation for new and all council members have been invited. We've got over half committed to attend. We're expecting a few more to commit in the next day. That'll occur on Thursday, and we've carved out about 3 hours, give a broad overview of JEA, the challenges that we have, and some of the great opportunities that what we present in terms of community involvement and serving their constituents and our customers. We have the council committee on JEA is continuing to work, and we meet next Tuesday with the committee, and we will be providing them with a report that we've concluded through surveying a number of utilities on the contribution and transfer policies nationwide. And so we'll frame that up and provide a bunch of additional benchmark information and address some of the concerns that they've raised with some position statements that we will have as we go forward. To some extent, we think that it'll be at least be able to be used as a final document to wrap up this council's work on the issue. Many parts may be carried over into the next council and the next council year, but I think we've met our obligations there, working with the committee through these last number of months. And then finally, for the board, the budget process, now that the board has approved, it will be delivered to the council president, and the council auditor will send copies to the administration. The council auditor, we will work have been working very closely, we'll continue to work very closely with them. And so what's next up for us will be a scheduled meeting, generally occurs sometime in mid-August, where our budget will be presented to the finance committee of the council. It will be approved by the finance committee and then moved on to the full council. Final approval will be generally the last meeting in September, when the entire city and all of the independent authorities are approved. So that's this process going forward. We have from time to time invited board members to come to the presentation in mid-August. We'll get that date out. As we've gone forward, the process of presentation has quite frankly transferred a little bit. We get the council auditor well-schooled on our budget, and the council auditor does this for the other authorities as well, and essentially makes the presentation of our budget to the finance committee. We are there as a support role, and so all members are invited to attend to show support, but over time it's become a little less important in terms of the way the process has worked. So that's it.
Okay, thank you. Are there any announcements that any of the board members would like to make, or even Paul? No announcement? Okay. As we've already discussed during today's meeting, it's very hot already out there, which will inevitably lead to higher utility bills. I encourage all our customers to explore having an energy audit performed, or try an alternative billing arrangement like My Budget Plan. I already had to let my neighbor know on Facebook that she should try that. Also, if you're able, please participate in our Neighbor to Neighbor program, which helps JEA assist our customers who struggle with the higher bills during the summertime. With that being said, I shall adjourn this meeting.